Hey, and welcome back. Today we're looking at the third of 4 videos that I'm doing covering the AACA Fall Meet in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Today we're looking at the Hershey Car Show, which is one of, at least in my opinion, one of the top car shows in the country. There are literally hundreds of cars, so I'm just going to be able to give you just a small taste of what is there. There are more cars than you could ever really see. Without further ado, let's just jump in and look at some cool cars. One of the great things about this show is seeing the cars roll in the morning. The car you're looking at here is a 1911 Oldsmobile Limited. This car really demonstrates the massive change that the Oldsmobile company underwent in just 10 years. In 1901, founder Ransom E. Olds introduced the Curve Dash Oldsmobile. This was America's first mass-produced, low-priced car. Here are actually 2 Olds Limiteds, by the way. New ownership wanted to move the company more up-market, but Ransom was against that, so he left the company in 1904. The company was sold to General Motors in 1908, and here you see that in 1911 that move upmarket is continuing. You don't get much more upmarket than these. GM was aiming right at the top of the American car luxury market, aiming at the 3 Ps, Peerless, Pierce Arrow, and Packard. The 1910 Limited had a 505 cubic inch engine making 60 horsepower. This was increased to 707 cubic inches for 1911. This is larger and more expensive than anything offered by Cadillac at the time. These cars offer a glimpse into an alternative history where it was Oldsmobile, not Cadillac, that was GM's top luxury mark. Unfortunately for the Limited, Oldsmobile had for years sold that low-priced affordable car, and it was still thought of as a small car make. Nothing is small about the Limited. How big are those tires? 43 inches. For comparison's sake, a Model T of the same year is 30 inches. Anyway, from 1910 to 1912, there were about 800 Olds Limiteds produced, so they're kind of rare to see these days. To see 2 of them side by side is unheard of. Before we go, let's take a little peek at that massive Olds Limited engine. This is a straight 6 with cylinders cast in pairs. So each one of those jug-like things is actually 2 cylinders. Let's move on to a car brand that you may not have heard of. This is a 1926 Cunningham. Cunningham was an early buggy manufacturer that made the transition into making cars, and for a while they were one of America's premier brands. Cunninghams were driven by movie stars like Mary Pickford, Harry Lloyd, and Fatty Arbuckle, as well as other American luminaries like William Randolph Hearst, Philip Wrigley, and Cecil B. DeMille. This example is a nice touring car. Here you can see that the back seat passengers have their own fold-up windshield, so that when the top is down, you don't get so much wind. Cunningham also made some very high-quality hearses. They stopped production in 1931. Next up, we have a 1934 Nash. Despite the Depression going on, a time when new car sales were only 13% of their pre-production numbers, Nash was actually doing pretty well, and in '34 had all new models. Just a couple of years after this, Nash wanted to bring experienced production guy George Mason into the fold. George at the time was vice president of Kelvinator Appliances, so Nash agreed to buy Kelvinator. 'Cause why not, after all? This is a really nice looking coupe, by the way, and I like the period touches. Take a look at this license plate topper from the Ship Hotel. That was a ship-shaped hotel in central Pennsylvania. Moving forward a couple of decades, we have a 1957 DeSoto Fire Dome. DeSoto, of course, was a Chrysler product, and the Fire Dome was the mid-level model between the Fire Sweep and Fire Flight. You know, they really knew how to name things. 1957 was a great styling year for Chrysler, with Virgil Exner's forward look in full swing. I've always liked the DeSoto designs especially. Although 57 was a great year for DeSoto, their sales slide began right after this, and they were phased out after 1960. Hey, when's the last time you saw a Tucker show up at a car show? Tucker, of course, is the 1948 brainchild of Preston Tucker, and there were only 51 of them ever made, including the prototype. As you can see, the Tucker was a rear-engined car, and this is car number 13. Car number 13 is generally on display at the Swigert Museum up in central Pennsylvania, but they brought it down for the show, which is nice. I've covered the Swigert Museum before on this channel, and it is well worth the stop. The engine here in the rear is based on a flat-six helicopter engine, although heavily modified. It's 334 cubic inches and makes 166 horsepower. This earlier production Tucker would be equipped with the Y1 transmission, which was a modification on the Cord 810-812. The Cord interior is actually very Spartan compared to other cars at the time, with the instrument cluster looking more like an airplane than a car. This particular Tucker was used in the movie Tucker, the Man and His Dream, about Preston Tucker. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a great story and lets you know a little bit about why there were no 1949 Tuckers. The story of Tucker is one of the great might-have-beens in automotive history if politics hadn't gotten involved. Nearby, we have another rare car. This is a 1954 Kaiser Darren. There were only 435 of these ever produced. This is a fiberglass body. Note the sliding doors there, fancy. The body was designed by Howard Darren and fitted onto a Henry J chassis. The Henry J was actually a good performing car, but maybe not up to sports car standards. At any rate, Kaiser was really on the financial ropes by 1954, so really no flagship sports car was going to save the company at that point. 1933 Ford Model 40. This is over in the historic preservation class, meaning that this car is largely original. 33 is a great styling year for Ford, and it was the first year that they really moved away from that sort of Model A-like appearance into a more modern design. There you see that large leather section up on the roof. That's actually a wooden ribbed insert because they hadn't yet figured out how to make those really big stampings for a fully steel roof. Nice, looks like original upholstery in there. The 33 Flathead had some engine tweaks to get over some of the teething problems that the 32 had. Also, we have a longer wheelbase to go along with the redesign. This was also the last year that the four-cylinder was offered as an option. 1978 Chevy Suburban in Silverado trim level. I'm a big fan of Suburbans. I've pretty much always had a Suburban in the fleet. I had an 86 that, I don't know, this reminds me of my 86, so I like it a lot. Older Suburbans are getting a little hard to find, especially nice, clean, rust-free ones like this. I know personally mine are work trucks, so when I'm done with them, they're done. This one is a half ton. Mine are usually 3/4 ton because, you know, work trucks. This one has obviously lived its life somewhere sheltered from northern winters and the salt that goes along with them, and it's nice to see. The accessory mirrors would indicate that this was probably a tow vehicle, maybe for someone's travel trailer that only got used in the summer. Also over in historic preservation class, we've got this 1936 Chevrolet truck. But look at those original side graphics. This is the truck that brings you bakery goodness, and who doesn't like that? And this is where all the bakery items were, a nice, spacious cargo area. This is an area where stand-up delivery trucks were starting to become more popular, so this certainly would have been more comfortable to drive than one of those. The fact that this panel truck was used by a bakery rather than, say, a carpenter or a plumber meant that it probably wasn't abused as much as one of those other trucks and contributed to its survival. Next up, we have what's one of the best-looking large trucks ever made, the 1938 Studebaker K20. The K20 is the 2-ton variation on the K-Series that was all new for 38. The truck is powered by a Studebaker Straight 6. This was a 226 cubic inch engine this year and gave 90 horsepower. This would have been purchased new as a cabin chassis with third-party wrecker assembly on the back. One of the incredible things about this truck is it has been in the original family since it was new. Here's a picture of it, new. After all these years, it's still in the Snyder family, and they brought it here to show today. Just a great looking truck in history. This is a Lamborghini. Specifically, this is a 1969 Lamborghini Mira. Ferruccio Lamborghini, of course, became very successful in the manufacture of tractors in the 1950s, but his real passion was sports cars. He had a famous dispute with Ferrari over the low quality of their clutches. So he went and started his own company in 1963. Their first big hit came in 1966 with the release of the Mira. This is the car that really put Lamborghini on the map. The fastest production car in the world when it was released. It's a rear mid-engine two-seat arrangement that was rare at the time but has since become standard for supercars everywhere. I know you've heard me say this before, but this car does not have a bad angle. I say that because I truly believe there are some vehicles out there that just surpass normal standards and are works of art. This was in production from 1966 to 1973 when it was replaced in the lineup with the Countach. This is a P400 model. They made 275 of these things. It's powered by a 3.9-liter V12 that makes 345 horsepower. Moving from Italy to France, we have not a Lamborghini. This is a 1966 Renault R8 Gordini. The Renault 8 was a rear-engine car. As you can see, there is nothing up front. It was produced in France and also Bulgaria and Spain. Gordini at the time was a third-party performance company, although they would later become a division of Renault, but they worked with Renault to develop a sport version of the Renault 8. The horsepower on the Gordini version was increased from 49 to 89. Moving back over to familiar shores, here's a 1938 Packard convertible Victoria. You can see that is a three-position top. It could be in this position all the way forward or all the way back. The Darren logo means that this car was designed by automotive stylist Howard Dutch Darren. He set up a shop in Hollywood and modified standard Packard models into unique creations. Beautiful car. This nice-looking 1960 Imperial is parked over in driver participation class. This is a class for driver-quality vehicles that are really nice to look at, but are not expected to be 100-point show cars. Sure, it's nice to look at cars that have been completely 100% redone, but there's really something to be said for cars like this that are just nice, well-worn old cars. Cars like this that are just fun to drive and won't give you anxiety if they're approached by a shopping cart. 1914 Overland Model 79R Roadster. This was actually a very popular car at the time. When Overland was purchased by Willys and moved to Toledo in 1912, they were the number 2 selling car behind Ford, and they would maintain that number 2 position all the way up until 1919 when they were displaced by Chevy. This has a 4-cylinder engine making 35 horsepower compared to the Model T's 22, and has a transmission that gives it 3 forward gears compared to the Model T's 2 forward gears. The price when new was $950 compared to the Model T Roadster at $440. You can see why the Model T sold so well. Moving to another Toledo-made product, here's a 1978 Jeep J10. Jeep had dropped the Gladiator name after 1971, so this is just simply the Jeep Pickup J Series. This one has the Golden Eagle trim package. Jeep offered a number of appealing trim packages, including the popular Honcho. This same year, they offered a special Jeep 10-4 that came with a factory CB. They also offered special Levi's branded interiors. Although I gotta say, the Golden Eagle is a pretty attractive package. Let's zoom in on this hood. That is fantastic! Jeep offered the Golden Eagle package from 1977 to 1983, but it's been revived a couple of times on some special editions. All right, now it's time to talk about this thing. Yes, this was marketed in the US as the Thing. Officially the Type 181, this was developed for the West German military and uses regular VW Beetle underpinnings. This is the spiritual successor to the World War II era Kübelwagen. The convertible top is completely removable, as are the doors. It was sold in the U.S. from 1972 to 1974. This is a 73 model. It failed to meet the 1975 safety standards, but still continued to be sold in Mexico all the way up until 1980. In Mexico, it was marketed as the Safari. Next up, we have a 1910 Metz two-cylinder runabout. The Metz had always been an affordably priced car, and 1912 was no exception. You could actually buy a stripped-down Metz Roadster for under the price of a Model T. Of course, this is a two-cylinder car with a chain drive and friction transmission. Those are features more commonly seen 5 years earlier than this. Metz was offering cars fully assembled now, though. You used to have to build them yourself. Long story. Anyway, that 1912 Metz would have cost somewhere between $400 and $500 new. This 1911 Baker would have set you back $2,700. This Baker, of course, is an electric car with the usual tiller steering arrangement. Electric cars were easier to operate and at the time were generally marketed towards women. That's why we have enclosed cars with such high amounts of headroom to accommodate large hats. This particular car was purported to have received one of the first license plates ever issued in the state of Washington. Just a few years after this, it started to become obvious that electric cars weren't keeping up in performance with gasoline-driven vehicles. Baker disappeared in 1915 after merging with competitor Roush & Lang. Roush & Lang got into making taxi cabs and struggled on until 1932. This owner has handouts with the car's history. That's an interesting idea for a car show. He also has a very nice website, vintageelectriccars.com. Go check it out. Hey, remember those massive Olds Limiteds I started this video off with? Well, here's the opposite end of the Oldsmobile scale. This is a 1903 Curved Dash Olds. This was America's first truly affordable mass-produced car and the sort of car that Ransom Olds wanted to make. And yes, those are leather-covered fenders. This is a 1903 Model R. The Curved Dash Oldsmobile remained in production until 1907, although with a lot of continuous improvements along the way. Oldsmobile also started offering larger models starting the following year, 1904. Next up, we have a 1906 Rio Coupe. This is the only one known to exist and was supposedly built for the 1906 New York Auto Show. This is a former Hurrah collection car and is very fancy. Communication to the driver from the passenger compartment is done through speaking tube. It uses a two-cylinder 16-horsepower motor, and advertising states that the body can be easily removed to convert into a normal touring car if you show desire. If you like high-end cars, by the way, this show has them in spades. That was a Lincoln, that's a Packard. Next up we have a Pierce Arrow. After that we have actually a very nice Franklin. The rows of very nice and expensive cars are just a wonderful thing to see in this show. I really wish I had the time to stop and show you each and every car, but like I said, this is just a massive show. Next up, we have a 1931 Lincoln, but this one's a little unusual. This is a custom build for businessman Ned Green, who had only one leg. The story is a little more interesting than that, though. His mother, Hetty Green, made a fortune investing in Wall Street in the 1870s and 1880s and became the richest woman in America. She was a bit eccentric, though, and was also known as the Witch of Wall Street. She was a cheapskate in the extreme. In fact, when young Ned broke his leg, she tried to get it treated for free at a charity hospital. When she was recognized and turned away, she stormed off, vowing to treat it herself. The leg later developed gangrene and needed to be amputated. Young Ned turned out very different from his mother. He spent extravagantly and was a well-known philanthropist. He was the first person in the city of Dallas to own a gasoline-powered car. He had this custom-made Lincoln built for himself at the age of 61. Next up, we have a 1933 Pontiac. This is the first year for the Pontiac straight 8 engine, and Pontiac this year was the least expensive 8-cylinder engine on the market. They kept costs down by sharing a lot of sheet metal with the Chevy Master of that year. This particular car is a Model 309 5-passenger sedan and the most expensive Pontiac offered that year. Well, it was the same price as the convertible coupe, but still, most expensive. I gotta say, this silver with the white really gives off kind of a ritzy look. Those front and rear bumpers that the car has were options this year, although the original owner did not opt for the add cost side mount spare or disc wheels. The price delivered would have been about $700 in 1933 or about $17,000 in 2024. Next up, we have the 1949 Playboy. Yes, there's only one. Playboy was founded in 1947 by Packard dealer Lou Horwitz to offer a small economical car to the American public. Unfortunately, only 97 cars were completed in 1947 and 48, with one almost completed in 49. Although the factory never completed this car, work was completed in 2014 by Dave Kaplan, grandson of the founder. He's showing it here today. Here's a 1957 Volkswagen Carmen Gia. Underneath the chassis is a normal Volkswagen Beetle, but the body was designed by Italian firm Gia and produced by German coach builder Carmen. The Carmen Gia was produced in one form or another from 1955 all the way up to 1975. Interestingly, Volkswagen didn't ask for this body to be designed. The Italian and German firms got together, designed it of their own accord, and then presented it to Volkswagen. When it was introduced in 1955, this is the only other body style that Volkswagen had ever offered besides the Beetle. These were final assembled in both West Germany and Brazil. Sticking with Volkswagen, but moving up to 1965, we have a Type 2. This is a 21 window. They did make a 23 window. See those rear quarters there? Before 1964, there were 2 windows, one on each side right there, but they made the rear door a little bit wider in 64, so they had to take those windows away. Anyway, still a lot of windows here. See, they're washing them right now, and they're going to be washing them, I'm sure, all day. Or at least it'll seem like it. I shudder to think what their Windex budget is. If you ever see one of these at a show, please don't touch the glass. I'm sure the owner is already tired of cleaning them. Keep it up. Only 20 more to go. Here's a 1912 Hudson Model 33. Actually, all Hudsons in 1912 were Model 33, offered in a variety of body styles, including the mile-a-minute Roadster that came with no doors or windshield, but did come with a 100-mile-an-hour speedometer. Why? Because with all due respect, I'd like to go fast. Next up, we have a Canadian-built car. This is a 1906 Russell, made in Toronto. Starting off life as the Canadian Cycle and Motor Company, they moved into automobiles and produced their first car in 1905 with the Model A. This is the larger 1906 Model B. Advertised as a thoroughly Canadian car, this was Canada's first successful automobile company. Starting in 1910, they used Knight sleeve valve engines, but not the American Knight engine. They used a version that had been tweaked by Daimler, the Daimler Knight engine. This is not that, though. In 1906, we're still using a 2-cylinder horizontally opposed engine. Next up, we have a 1912 Abbott Detroit Model 44. In this case, the 44 stands for 44 horsepower. The Abbott Detroit was made in, you guessed it, Detroit, Michigan. Although, like many things, the company moved to Cleveland just before it died. It was a well-built car that was advertised as built for performance and guaranteed for life. I'm assuming that the owner is a great guy because he is, after all, a friend of ancient road transportation. Anyway, Abbott folded up in 1918, so their guaranteed for life slogan lasted for, 4 years. It would take days for me to even see all the cars that are at this show, so I'm hitting just the highlights, and I'm sure there are plenty of highlights that I'm missing just because I don't see them. Here's a highlight. This is a 1959 Jeep Sur Gayla, and yes, this is a real thing. In the 50s, Jeep was building DJ-3A dispatchers for the U.S. Postal Service. That contract ended in 1958, leaving Jeep with some extra inventory. Thus, we have the Jeep Sur Gayla, made from 1959 to 1964 and aimed at resorts in Hawaii and the Caribbean. There were 3 color options: tropical coral, cerulean blue, and jade tint green. Here's a car you hear a lot about but don't really see too often: 1969 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser. What sets the Vista Cruiser apart from other station wagons is up here in the roof. We've got this glass section where you can look up and see the vistas. Also a nice roof rack up there for all the family luggage. But even without the Vista view, we have a very nice station wagon with a tasteful amount of yacht paneling. This show is open to cars 25 years and older, which this year comes up to 1999. Although they don't seem that old to me, there is a younger generation of car enthusiasts coming up that are interested in 90s cars because these were made before they were born. As I get older, I realize math is a horrible thing. Next up, we have a 1942 Ford GWP being shown by the World War II American Experience Museum in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This one is painted in high visibility follow me colors and would have been used by the U.S. Air Force. When large aircraft like bombers would come into land, this would drive out onto the runway and guide them as they taxied to the correct place. These were particularly important if you had crews coming in from other locations that weren't familiar with the base layout. Anyway, fun to see. 1965 Ford F-150. 1965 saw the introduction of a new frame as well as new twin I-beam independent suspension. Ford also introduced a new cab that would continue with minor alterations until 1979. This particular truck is fitted with the flare side bed as opposed to the style side. Ford engineers determined that the components involved with the four-wheel drive arrangement caused too much flexing and would only work with this flare side bed. This particular truck is fitted with a 352, making 208 horsepower. Hey, here's another airport vehicle. This is a 1948 Crosley Gas Porter. This is an airport fuel tanker that you really don't see. I don't think I've ever seen one. The back half is all gas tank. Hey, look, aviation fuel is 44 cents a gallon. So I'm guessing if you're a private pilot, you would have just paid the driver? Anyway, walking around out front, you can see this whole thing is powered by the mighty Crosley engine. Anyway, these were not just used at airports, they were also used by marinas to get gas out to boats. They did use a Crosley chassis, but were not actually made by Crosley. Here is a professional car. This one has a 1963 Cadillac base, although Hearst conversions were done by third parties. This one was done by Eureka. Eureka, as a coach builder, can trace their history back to 1871. They were eventually purchased by Superior, but are still in business with a plant in Lima, Ohio. As I walked the car show, I could really stop and talk to you about so many cars. Here's a great line of Mopar muscle. There are sections here for just about any interest that you might have. The AACA does like stock appearing cars though, so you really won't be seeing any rat rods here today. There is a whole section of race cars, but I didn't really get over there this year. I try and give a good mix of eras, but my apologies if you see a really good car in the background that you wish I covered that I didn't. We're going to wrap things up by looking at a Jaguar. Well, not really a Jaguar. This is an SS, a 1934 SS1. Swallow Sidecar was formed in 1922 and developed into a coach builder, and in 1931 released their own car, the SS1. The chassis was supplied by Standard Motor Company, so the SS purportedly stands for Standard Swallow. In 1936, they released a new model, the SS Jaguar. However, World War II came around and the SS initials maybe took on some bad connotations. After 1945, the name of the company was changed to just Jaguar. At the 1945 shareholders meeting, Founder William Lyons says unlike SS, the name Jaguar is distinctive and cannot be connected or confused with any similar foreign name. You know, just in general, not that any specific foreign names or organizations spring to mind. Anyway, the SS1 is really great to see. It's really the very first Jaguar model. In 1934, it was available as coupe, tourer, or salon body styles. It has just this really great pre-war European sports car look. Well, I hope you enjoyed just that small taste of the Hershey Car Show. It's a great car show. If you're at all into cars, I recommend that you attend. The Hershey Swap Meet is always the first full week in October, and the car show is on Friday of that week, so you can mark it down on your calendars for next year. Anyway, if you like this video, comment. What's your favorite car and why? You can subscribe to the channel. There's a link right about there so that you can subscribe and get future videos. There's a little bell icon that you can hit somewhere that will give you a little notification when I release a video. If you like this video, you can go and look at some of my other ones. There's some great older videos back there. There's a link right about there to a random video, or you can go to my channel and just pick whatever you want to watch. Anyway, until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.